Well, sitting here with Todd Waters, 2019 Pro MX Champion, and man, I cannot believe what a funky world in COVID, man. It was a year ago that we were just a little ways down the road from here at Green Park, a little way down the road at Kenilworth, testing the 2022 range of Husqvarnas. But I guess the reason we've sort of, it's great to have Todd out here. We're now testing the all new generation 2023 models, which have got huge ranges across the board. So I guess the reason I've got Todd is I want to put him on the spot, because I remember last year, we were talking and I was saying, mate, 4th generational evolution, and you were like, great, music to my ears, know what I'm getting, predictable platform, developed all my race bike off it, and then here we are, a year down the track, and they've brought out completely new things. So is it a little bit bittersweet for you, a little bit of, you going like, I'm kind of, I love the idea of this, but on the other hand, it's like, man, I've got to move away from what I know.
Yeah, listen, from a professional racer point of view, like, we don't like change. We like to, progress on what we've got and make it better. But, in saying that, we need to evolve and build the range and get better. And that's the factory's job. And that's what they've done this year. Like, behind us here, I've been out on the smaller bikes here this morning. So I've been out on the 2-stroke, which has got massive changes across the whole thing. And then the 254-stroke as well. So been having to play with those, really enjoying them. But as we dive into the bike a little bit more, it's completely different. So it does add excitement. And that's what buyers need. You can get a bit stale where you're like, man, it's the same bike for many years. And that's what's good about Husqvarna is they're racing across the globe at the highest level. They've got top test riders. They're developing bikes and they're making big changes. And this bike behind us, I think, like last night we seen on the screen, there's maybe like 5 parts that are the same. 7 from last year. So the bike is,
and one of them's grips.
Yeah, and handlebars. So it's completely different, but we've been riding it all morning now. We've stopped for lunch and I'm stoked with the bike. Like, it's the changes I'm feeling really comfortable. It's still my Husqvarna. The thing that I really like is how the plastics work on the bike, especially at the side plates. They've got the little scallop. I use them as like steg pegs, and I love that about the Husqvarna. So, but they've made some massive improvements with the way that the frame is. Instead of sort of bowing out, it's really straight, and I'm able to feel a lot of contact with my boot. I'm using my feet a lot more now that I'm getting older, and foot pegs, they've got really nice foot pegs on it. So that's the first thing I notice hopping on the bike is, hey, the throttle feels the same, clutch, front brake, because it's all Brembo. That's what we've had in the past. That's all familiar to me. Plastics, the shape is nice. Husqvarna's always finished the bikes really well, and there's nothing that grab on your knees or legs grabbing. So that's really nice. So overall, I jump on the bike and I feel really, really comfortable.
I guess the reason I ask you that question, Todd, is when you look at your career, your first championship, your first Premier Class Championship, 2019, when you first came on board, and that was the last big generational jump for Husqvarna, right? So interesting what you're saying about the bikes and your first feeling. I guess from a concept point of view, they're differentiating themselves from the KTMs this year. It's also had big generation change with a lower seat and slightly more raked out. And I know you're a guy who loves a stable chassis, right? You're like, give me a bike that turns and it's not a supercross bike, right? So is that move to a slightly lower seat and to a slightly more raked out fork something that's sort of in your mind works as well?
Do you know what, Andy? It's something where you only notice a bike that doesn't handle. When you're coming in a corner and things trying to fall over on you because the rake's too steep, it's trying to push through turns, like, that's when you go, there's something going on here with the geometry of the bike or triple clamp setup. I've just been out there, I feel really, really comfortable. So for me, it's working. The changes that they've made, I just feel super comfortable straight up. And like I say, a lot of times you'll hop on a standard bike and you'll be like, oh man, this is really good because of the hype of the bike. But once we do this and this, I'll feel comfortable. But then sometimes this and this doesn't actually come throughout the year, so you never feel comfortable. Whereas this, straight up, I'm stoked. Like, we got the air forks in this. A lot of people shy away from the air forks.
I was going to ask you, because you're a fan, right?
I'm a massive
even though you
fan.
Don't race with them, but when you jump on a stock bike, you're a fan of the things, as we spoke about last year.
And that's like these 2 bikes behind me here, the chassis, it really works. Like I was saying to the boys when I come in, I was like, man, this thing is initially so plush. Like, it's working. Yes, it goes through a stroke a bit for me. I'm 80 kilos on a 250. These things are designed for kids and smaller riders. So it does, the suspension moves a lot, but it doesn't bottom out for me. We're here at Conondale, so there's some big downhills, some big hits. And overall, I'm feeling really, really comfortable with the bike. It sits in the turns really nice. The front's nice and stable at high speed. But especially coming into corners, you know, it sort of goes and then it pops, and I feel really comfortable through the ruts.
Yeah, I think a lot of the other journos saying same sort of thing, very much more neutral feeling this year rather than loading the front a lot more. So it seems chassis moved in the right direction, slight tilt to the engine, sort of adjusted the sort of weight bias between front and rear as well. But mate, I saw you getting out there, you've ridden pretty much everything. We've got 2 2-strokes and then the 3 4-strokes here, right? There's a lot of common, I think they call it standardization, shared elements, transmissions, all kinds of stuff, right? So in a lot of ways it highlights a different capacity. So I know you got a bit of a sore thumb, and but am I right in saying I saw you tearing the bag out of it on that 250F? You know, because the 450s are, like you say, it's a beast. It's a bike you can ride. You don't necessarily want to. But what were your favourites? Man,
I love the 2-stroke. I personally have a 2-stroke, 252-stroke. I race at state titles in the 250 class, and I just have a ball on this bike. They're really light, they're nimble. You know, the Husqvarna has a really nice power delivery in the 2-stroke, and now it's got fuel injection and electric start. So that was something that was a bit weird for me. I haven't had a Kickstarter since, man, like 2008 or even further. I can't even remember. So for me at the state titles, using Kickstarter, I'm sort of like, what's going on here? So we've got electric start. The big thing is they've got really nice electrics now for their traction control and their map switch, like really neat little buttons.
Yeah, and they're bigger differences. They're not just changing ignition. I think you can now change fuel and ignition as well.
So I was really impressed with the fuel injection actually, because when I first went out on the bike, when I backed off, it sort of was like ning, ning, ning. It sounded like it was lean. And I was like, I expected it to sort of be punchy and run out. It needed more fuel. But as soon as I got in the turn, I gave it throttle. It just, and it must dump fuel in there. It's running perfect. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on one of those.
And I know on the downhills you were saying the 250F, like, you know, the FT250 compared to the 450 just carries itself so much more, just because we were saying power's the enemy of suspension, right? So it's got the same suspension components, pretty much same spring settings across. I think the fork might be slightly softer in the standard air setting, but that's a sweet handling little thing, huh?
Yeah, and the power delivery is nice and smooth, and it feels long for me, which I really like.
Yeah.
So I hate a real short bike where you're almost having to click a gear halfway through the turn. So with the 250F, it just feels nice and smooth. You get on the gas and it just wants to drive all the way through the turn, and it holds its gear. So that's super cool for me, because normally you're like, I need to drop a tooth, and then it might not have the grunt because I'm heavier to pull it. So straight up, I'm pretty impressed with the 2 smaller bikes.
This stage of the season, I think you've got a couple of rounds left over the next few weeks, you know, of the national championship. What's the temptation like to jump onto the newbies from a marketing perspective, right? Yeah, cool. But from a racer, like you said, it's racing what you know. It's kind of like dumb, right, to be changing mid-season?
Yeah, it is. It's, I wouldn't say dumb, but yeah, for us, we like to feel comfortable, develop it. Like, you know, we've got a hard pack track coming up at QMP, and then we've got a sand track at Coolum. So I don't know how these bikes handle in those 2 scenarios. I've put millions of hours on the other bike, chassis, the program that we got. So yeah, it's difficult to just jump straight on a bike. So we know what we've got. We'll continue with that. But straight after Coolum, we're going to get our hands on a new bike, start developing it for next year, which excites me because it is new. There's a lot of different, like the seat is quite a lot flatter. So that was something that I noticed as well, is where you sit on the bike, which is really interesting for me because I ride the 701, you know, on the road, and it's got a quick shift. And on the road, because there's maximum traction, you can't change gears without a quick shift. Like it just, you got to use the clutch or something, because it's just, I don't know, it gets so bound up. And I don't know much about road bikes, but so I was interested when the 450 had a quick shift on it, so I was out there testing that.
I saw you doing a bunch of starts. You did about a dozen back-to-back starts, huh?
Yeah, because I was interested in it and how it works, and it's a lot different for me, but for us, getting third gear is so important. And sometimes you'll get out and your 450 might spin up, goes up in the high RPM, you can't click third, sorry. So sometimes you got to pop the clutch, and that's your start done.
Yeah, and then you got the option, if you don't want it beyond the start, you just got the option to
it's right there on the, you got traction control, which we've had in the previous models, which I use a lot. I really enjoy the traction control. Previously, to do an off-road, I didn't use traction control. We'd take it straight off and I didn't even use it. But then I went off-road and I found how great traction control is, that then I was like, put it on my motocross bike, I want to try it. And
it's underrated, huh?
It's very underrated. I find when I run traction control, I'm wheeling everywhere. You know, instead of 450, as you can imagine, a lot of the time, give it gas and it wants to spin up on you. So this really, you know, it works together with the engine and gives you maximum traction.
Talking off-road, talking about jumping on a bike you don't know before. I don't know if I'm speaking out of school here, mate, but didn't word come through a few days ago that you might be joining the Aussie 6-day team over in France?
Yep.
Huge news, man.
Yeah,
wow.
huge news.
Congrats.
So it's been a year of firsts for me.
Yeah.
It's you know, we had our first 4-day, which was amazing. Like, I was out of my depth, and by the last 2 days we won class and won an outright the last day. I started to feel comfortable with
And
the
fourth
whole
overall,
program.
I think, by the whole after 4 days.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my first 2 days I was just like, what's going on here? I'm pulling cards out and all this stuff which I'm not used to doing. So
Yeah.
I was really interested to see how my body would handle 4 days, and I was kind of proud that I was like, oh man, this is good. I'm fit enough. It's no dramas. I'm excited for the 6th day. I wanted more days when we're doing the 4-day. I really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to that. Overseas adventure. It's over in France this year. Team Australia is always strong, so we've got some pressure to live up to, and it's a first for me experiencing that, which is exciting. And like I said, first 4-day this year, first full season of off-road, and first had a desert race, so it's been really exciting.
Well, you've done all right at this off-road caper, mate, and juggling it with your motocross duties as well. So, mate, all the best for over there. Great to have you here at the launch. It's been a glamour day, and awesome to be at Green Park. And yeah, look, really just good to see you. You know, like flying the flag, mate, for across so many disciplines, and probably the busiest race in Australia, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's for sure.